Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the channel. A lot has been going on in the news, but before we start talking about the news and your take on what's going on, especially in the Middle East, I want to remind the audience in the description of this video and all my videos, I believe this series, this is part 13, and in the description, there's a link to John's website. So click the link, that'll take you to his website. You'll be able to sign up for his periodical. Also, he does readings. So that way you can help support him and his work. So again, click that link and that'll take you to his website. So John, thank you for coming on to the channel.
For having me.
We are living in strange times, and
Interesting times, as the Chinese
yeah,
would say.
yeah, and what was interesting is this. Maybe it was Friday. I think it was Friday night where I think the news started talking about some of the inner war cabinet within Netanyahu's
Above
circle.
the usual.
Yeah, was complaining that they need to have some sort of after after war plan on what's going on in Gaza. And I guess he gave an ultimatum, and then
It was
uh,
Benny Gantz, by the way, who did that. Yes.
about a little bit more than 24 hours later, um, we hear in the news of this Iranian helicopter crash.
Yeah.
So, take it away. I mean, give me your perspective on what's going on and anything else that you would like to add.
Yeah, there's first I'm going to start with a bit of a backstory, as I often do. I have just released just a few days to my subscribers, and it's free samples are already up at HogueProphecy.com of my newest release, which I released, I think, when was it? Just a second. It was on the 16th, even though it was a couple days before, but I released it out. But I basically blasted through 37,000 words in 3 weeks, just and keeping up with all the things that happened in April, such as what I call the 20 days in April Iran-Israeli missile crisis. And that was then followed in March, around the 5th or 6th, with another crisis that was dealing with the Russians finally saying, fed up with all the NATO people that are in country in Ukraine, guiding the missiles deep into Russia that are British, run by British officers. The whole Macron with his wanting to be Napoleon, only this time, actually, Alexander Mercurius of the Duran, I believe it was, who came up with a really great insight. Um, he's not Napoleon the First. He's more like Napoleon the Third, the nephew of the great Napoleon, who kind of pretended to be an emperor with a pretend second empire that a glorious mediocrity. And I think Macron, if he's the reincarnation of Napoleon, he's number three, and acting like a number two and a number one in another terminology. And anyway, so all these things, the Russians have been warning, don't put your people in the area. Don't this proxy war. We're getting tired of it. And of course, the way the mediocrity is running Europe and America look at that is, oh, it's weakness. He's not pushing back. The Russians aren't pushing back. But around May 6th, they pushed back. They said they started to do non-strategic nuclear exercises. They announced it. They basically said, if you fire your storm shadow British missiles, we know your British people are guiding them. You people in NATO have been sending all this weaponry in there, killing Russian people, Russian civilians, and Russian soldiers. And as long as you kind of kept it asymmetric, that was part of the rules. But now that you're openly talking about coming in, and this is something that I've been talking about for about 2 years in this war, that um, there is a pattern. There is a pattern. So we had the missiles thing was bad enough, but we have basically had in the last 6 weeks two potential Cuban missile crises. And I've been saying this is going to get like this in this 6 month period that started, it kind of climaxes in September into October, is where we'll have these coming right to the brink. Now, the Western media will not talk about it that way. They were not telling the people of the West how close we've come twice in the last 6 weeks to a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia and a war with Israel and Iran. And there was also another real shocker story that got out that was actually given on top of this missile crisis issue. There was this, Pepe Escobar. He's a Brazilian journalist, really good source, used him for years. He's uh, he's a real international reporter. He lives in Hong Kong. He is cultivated over 35, 40 years. Very solid sources. And I really understand that because, I don't have a personal connection with most of my sources, but I always cite them, and sometimes they know of me, sometimes they're not. They're too busy otherwise. But the thing that I understand that Pepe's done is something I've done, is that it takes years to vet the people that you use. You have to vet them, and that takes time and events. They have to be judged. Their statements and all have to be judged by the judge of time and events. So, I mean, some of them are very old, long-lasting sources, like Scott Ritter, the Marine major, who's a former Marine intelligence officer, and more famously for being a UN weapons inspector. The one man that blew the whistle before the invasion into Iraq happened, Operation Iraqi Freedom. In 2002 and 2003, he stood up, very brave of him, and said, look, these weapons you say of mass destruction that are in Iraq, my team, if anybody should know, it's me and my team. We worked throughout the 90s going through there. And when we can categorically, objectifiably say he has no weapons of mass destruction. He came real close. And the Persian Gulf War ruined that. But when they started looking into what extent he was actually very close to having Iraq having weapons of nuclear weapons, but the Persian Gulf War blew that all up. It all got destroyed, and anything that was of a chemical weapon nature, just the famous guy, the, um, the Secretary of State during Bush's time, holding up the
Rumsfeld?
file of
Oh, that was
Powell, yes,
Powell. Yeah.
a man who could have been president, but that destroyed it. It's sad because I admire him, but he he's kind of sold his integrity to the devil, the deep state. And so, he had the little vial. Well, frankly, anything that Saddam Hussein had in his weapons program that they had not uncovered would have degraded by now. Because that's the thing about chemical weapons, and they degrade. You can't. They lose their power and potency, just like some antibiotic creams, which are so frustrating because when you need them, you look at it, it's already the date is over. So don't get yourself cut. Anyway, so the Pepe Escobar got a call from his sources, and in my most recent Hogue prophecy bulletin report, I talk about it, and also the debunking of it and the debate. Scott Ritter came in, and other great sources, Larry Johnson, former CIA guy and State Department guy, and they all tried to source this out. They all agree that Pepe they don't blame Pepe for this report. They believe his sources. I mean, he's reporting what he's reporting as a journalist. He felt he had to, even though he also, his first impression was, this story I'm about to tell you is, well, this is the first thing he said in his Brazilian accent. This is so full of holes. No, it's just holes everywhere. And so, and he said, "You got to give me more than that." And the person said, "We can't give you any more with that. We can only give you this much," because it was implied he was kind of, without saying it, that they just wanted this message out. It sounds outrageous, but they needed it to be out there so that the court of public opinion would look at it and others would research it, and over time, maybe in a few months, few years, we might find out that and also it could be a play for some reason of the secret services of the world. But the source was a major Asian source, and it was backed up by two other Asian country sources of his. And he made a point that it was not China. So that maybe it's South Korea or Japan, but a major intelligence source from Asia. And basically, remember how the when okay, really quickly, a lot of moving parts in this. This whole 20 days of the missile crisis started on April Fool's Day, the very day when Mercury went into retrograde in Aries. Now, astrologically speaking, every 4 months you had about 3 weeks where a retrograde happens with Mercury, because we are farther out from the sun than Mercury. So it goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down in our sky from our point of view. So like Venus, it does a lot of retrogrades, maybe 3 or 4 a year. The most difficult one is in Aries, which is what this was. Aries is all about, let's go, oh, I don't want to edit this, I'll just send it out. It's that kind of energy. And so mistakes are made. And even actually, when I'm trying to deal with these different sources arguing over this, and Pepe as well, I had to point out points where the confusion was being influenced. I'm probably the only person who wrote about it in the world in this guise, astrologically, that is, that you can see it was also an object lesson in how even really good communicators can kind of drop the ball. Like Scott Ritter started talking about a missile being fired from an F-35, and Israeli F-35, when in fact Pepe Escobar had told them that it was a bomb, a gravity bomb. So the whole kind of, just giving an idea, everything went left field, because they were saying, well, it would ruin the stealth capability of the F-35 the Israelis had for the United States, which has these bomb bays that would be the stealth technology and the reflector refracting kind of thing that the surface of the jet does. No one would know that a bomb was being dropped until suddenly, out of nowhere, maybe over Natanz, Iran or something, a bomb's dropped. You could see it come out of the bomb bay. And what I also studied is, it was only just last year that the F-35 was given a nuclear capability to have a gravity bomb. So I actually tracked all that down. And now I would imagine, given what I know from my book, Nostradamus, The War with Iran, I did a lot of research into the history of how Israel, with the US and France's help, first France, it's funny because the French tried to help Saddam Hussein also have an atomic program. The that the Israelis have created, it's the biggest open secret in the Middle East, because of that the Israelis are nuclear capable, but they're a rogue nuclear state because they haven't declared them. And stories are that they've done atomics, they've done hydrogen bombs. They have also shrunk their weapons to be nuclear mines or even nuclear briefcases. So apparently they've got all the same capabilities that America and Russia has, but maybe under 200 warheads. Although some people have said 600, but no one can really prove or disprove how many there are. But they're there, and so I conjectured that perhaps the Israelis had a non-strategic, i.e. a tactical nuclear capability, gravity bomb that they could have flown in. So anyway, I'm kind of getting ass backwards into the story, but what happened is it's all started on April Fool's Day with, out of the blue, Netanyahu of Israel ordering up through Mossad's 8200. It's a watch base of Mossad where they on the Golan Heights, where a lot of spies and people infiltrate into Jews that look like Arabs, speak Arabic, go into Damascus, and we're watching the Iranian embassy and its adjunct, the consular building. An F-35 went up and fired a missile in one of those bomb bays, probably two, because it can only fire two if it's in stealth, and they absolutely obliterated the consular wing of the Iranian embassy and killed upwards of 15 Iranian people, but fundamentally 7 that were it was a decapitation. Remember that term, decapitation. It comes up a few times, maybe even what's happening today with the president of Iran, and what happened with Fico, the president of Slovakia. So keep those thoughts in mind. So the Iranians did something that shocked everybody, but not me, because even some of my good sources were curious and stuff, were like saying, why do the Iranians who had show such restraint? Why this time when the embassy was hit in Damascus, they immediately say, okay, we're going to retaliate. We're going to send a comparable outrage your way to what you've just done because you've attacked our sovereign territory. Most people should understand, since the Treaty of Vienna in 1945, at the end of the Second World War, it was agreed by treaty that any property that has an embassy of a foreign country in your country, that property is not America anymore. If you're America, it's not France anymore. You step through the door of that property, you are in, if it's the Iranian embassy, you're in Iran, you're in Israel. You're in America's territory if you're even in Moscow. So to attack an embassy, which is kind of ironic karma for Iran, because there was the 222 days of the American embassy that was invaded by a bunch of students and Republican guards, and they took the Marines and they took the embassy staff, and they had them as hostage. So it's kind of a bit karmic, because that was all happening when the Imam Khomeini was took the secular revolution and transformed it into an Iranian Islamic revolution. And so there is a little karma there. And, the theme of genocide also has a little karma for Israel. We've dealt with that before. So anyway, this then, so the Iranians have always been warning. I point out in my articles, I cite during the time of the Trump administration, everybody, the Trumpers keep saying, oh, Trump didn't go to war. Well, frankly, I got to be fair. He almost was duped to go to war 3 times because of the great weakness that our possible future president will have coming again, doing the Grover Cleveland, skipping 4 years. The only other president to do that was Grover Cleveland, another disputed election. And in his astrology, Trump, and it was the most accurate book of predictions I've ever made, was my book, Trump for President, Astrological Predictions, which I wrote in the autumn 2015, and had it all documented and published by December of 2015, before the primaries even started. And I talked about how he could have an upset victory, and if he passed through all the hoops, and there were like a whole army of Republicans running at that time, if he passed through all those Republican hoops, if he ended up standing at the election night, he had the best astrology of anybody I'd ever seen on an election night. All the stars were aligning. He could not be stopped, and that happened. And Hillary Clinton would win a majority of the popular vote, as I usually predict, but she would not be president. So it was an odd thing. I predicted her correctly that she won the popular vote, so that made my winning streak since 1968, Nixon and Humphrey, still on. And then but she lost because he won. She won the popular vote. He became president. So it's kind of an odd win-win situation prophetically. So there were two times when Trump is an open, powerful channel, but anybody before him, standing before him or influencing him, he channels them. So, if he becomes president, some people have to be more mindful of this than he is, that around him, is to make sure he's not influenced by the deep state, good luck, or the neocons, or his 8-year-old love of anybody in a big general's uniform, his kind of like boyish love of any general. It's his greatest strength and it's his greatest danger as president, is his inner 8-year-old, which he knows about. He even talked. That's how I found out of it. He started saying, you know, I haven't really changed. I've always been like this since I was 8 years old, he said to the lady, a host of 60 Minutes. And it's true. It's in his astrology. So it's going to sound really odd when if I have to write my third and final book on Trump. I thought I would hopefully not have to, but here we go. Is that he's going to need a lot of love to be a good president, as much as is possible from us, not a lot of hate. Because what happens is he has this ability to reflect hate back on the people who hate him. And they don't get it. It's a whole phenomenon of his astrology. He's a unique energy bunny. He just has this kind of way of being a mirror, and the more you're negative with it, it goes all back on you. So I'm going to write a book, an odd book, that talks about the best thing to do is give this 8-year-old inside of him love, because if you give 8-year-old your hate, and if the 8-year-old is very charismatic and precocious, um, you're not gonna do well. So, and I tested it on some of my Democrat friends, and they have meltdowns before my face. I will not mention any names, but I just watch them melting down from no, I hate it. Just and I said, well, and then your power is literally going right to him, and you will be defeated. And so he also has this incredible 11th hour luck. He is the Teflon Donald in so many ways. But anyway, so just I don't get too far off a tangent, as I usually do, that um, for all those people who think that Trump avoided a war, it was by pure luck, because John Bolton almost got him to do it twice with Iran. So that's when Bolton was gone by then, but some other creature from the deep state influenced him to kill Qasem Soleimani. And that was the third most powerful leader of Iran. It was assassinated on an errand of mercy, an errand of diplomacy, called to Iraq from Iran on the 4th of January, 2020. Because the Saudis had sent a letter to the prime minister of Iraq, that showed that they're open to do back channel negotiations to have a agreement of détente, to have peace between the two of them, so that they don't blow up the Middle East and blow up the Persian Gulf, Iran and Saudi Arabia. So So it was so important that he dropped what he was doing, and he flew from Soleimani flew from Tehran, and at 1 a.m. in the morning on the 4th, he landed in the international airport of Baghdad, and he was going to sleep for a few hours, and then they were going to have the meeting at dawn. So him and his motorcade were coming out of the airport, and a U.S. drone, one of the Reaper drones, assassinated him. And an Iraqi general that was also very much loved by the Shias, and 5 other people. And just assassinate him because somebody told Trump, oh, he's going to do something. He's going to blow something up really bad, which it never happened. And why would killing him stop that thing from happening? But, Donald just went, General, good. Lots of brass, lots of metals. Good. I do. It's just the way he is. And um, so, so then you so the Iranians were going to, years later now, we're in our year now, and the Iranians has said we're going to make a demonstration because you crossed our sovereignty. They warned Trump about that too, but Trump didn't actually. Trump was going to destroy when a one of those, the big domed, larger drones that we had. And it was in the Strait of Hormuz in the 19th of June, 2019, I think. And it was flying for hours in Iranian airspace. And the Iranians were saying, get out of our airspace, because that's like the second worst thing you can do. But it's actually attack Iran territory. That's the worst. So it was like one step away from the thing that the Israelis did on April Fool's Day this year, destroying sovereign territory of Iran in Damascus. So, and the famous story is that Trump asked, the way the story is told, but I think I do a variation on the way I've told it before, because he kind of probably he was starting to channel some brass that were from the Pentagon that were real people, not, deep state psychopaths, because there's a thin officer line in the Pentagon of people that kind of sit on the Pentagon chief, like Lloyd Austin and others, who's a former officer, but just said, well, sir, I cannot advise you to do that because that will start World War III. So anyway, they talked to Trump, said, look, it was like 10 minutes before they were going to wipe out 195 Iranians in a missile battery that did shoot down that drone, and it was in Iranian airspace. And so basically they told him, said, look, if you what's going to happen? Well, you're going to start a war across the whole Middle East, and we're not ready for it. We wouldn't even be able to get our resources there for another year, and there's no way we can invade Iran, and Iran's like 10 times bigger than Iraq, and we'll lose. And then that is when Trump kind of went, well, why should the 8-year-old then spoke through and said, well, the one that says you're fake news and stuff like that. It said, why are we going to kill a bunch of people just because a robot plane got shot down? And then he said, yeah, call them back. So, the kind of innocent child in him kind of gets almost convinced to, there's a bit of Pinocchio in him. Oh, let's do this and push this button. Oops. With the wars. And so everybody be mindful of that. If he has a good chance of becoming president, I haven't made my official prediction yet, but he has a good chance of becoming president. And once again, we've got a guy who means well, but in his own 8-year-old center, but he could very well be influenced to do something. In fact, he may have just been influenced. I'm still looking at this story, but Trump has. It comes from Robert Barnes, who has his amazing source for legal trial stuff. I got to see him on some of my other sources, on Duran and all, and he is a remarkable. If he's ever on the Duran or something, watch him. He's an amazing legal mind. And apparently he has a theory that, and he's worked with Trump legally before, and he has a theory that that the deep state got to Trump. And all this, people forget, and Mercurius really expressed this well in the Duran. He says, because he's a barrister, a lawyer, used to be in Britain. He says that he says, I'm amazed how Trump can handle the pressure of all these different trials on top of running a campaign. Of course, immense energy he has, but it's got to grind down on him. I mean, they're trying to tire him out and burn him out. And in fact, in a way, they may have partly succeeded, because it's possible that he's been kind of, since these trials are kind of failing, he might have made a deal to leave, look the other way for certain things the deep state wants if he's president, and as long as he's able to do this and that. And of course, that's so in a way he's buckling to it, and he doesn't understand to what length the deep state will just keep asking for more. But I can understand, as Mercurius does, the amount of the unbelievable lawfare that they're hurling at him. It's disgusting. It is traitorous, I would say. I wouldn't want to see Biden hit with that. I wouldn't want to see any candidate hit like that. It literally is showing that the deep state is running the show, and a certain person who runs Israel is having a lot of influence right now too, but and APAC and all of that. So we have a very odd situation with that. But so Iran then 13 days, on the 13th, 12 days after the April Fool's attack of Israel on Iranian embassy, the the Iranians launched their attack, and they did it in an interesting way. 300 drones were launched first. It took 5 hours to get to Israel. So they announced soon, like 5 hours, they said, we've launched. We're going to do a demonstration. We're not seeking to hit any civilian targets. We're just going to show you what we can do. Uh, like they showed the Americans as an answer for Soleimani. Once they buried Soleimani, they basically told Trump, we're not going to go after, we're not going to kill your soldiers, but we're going to do a demonstration to show you just what we could do. And they launched about 23 missiles, and they hit the base that took off the drone to kill Soleimani, the Iranians. It's the first time in history the Iranians launched on missiles on American targets. It was the 6th of January. That was the other time we almost went to war. He said, get all your people on underground. We're going to hit your base, but we don't want to hurt anyone. We just wanted to show you something, what we can do. And so the missiles all came in, bam, 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 bam. They took out the hangars where the drones are, took out the parts warehouses where the drones were, took out. Most of the drones were flying away in the air to get out of the way, and that meant that the 30 people that piloted them were not in their bunks, but in the reinforced bunker where they pilot the drones, exactly where the Iranians wanted them, so they wouldn't be hit. But when it was all over and dawn came, those people staggering from a tense day or an all-nighter, when they went home, it was obliterated. Their barracks, their home spaces were obliterated by 3 cruise missiles. Surgical, very surgical. What the world and what the Americans learned is that Iran has a superior level of cruise missile technology that is far improved, and I would say even rivals, if not transcends, the Tomahawks of the United States. They were able to drill everything they wanted to drill, not hurt anybody, not wound anybody. Some concussions happened, but anyway, when this all happened, when Trump said, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, nothing. Nobody died. Because that was they promised nobody not to kill anybody. They didn't kill anybody. So I guess that's it. The demonstrations happened. We hit, they hit, and there we are. And so at least he, unlike Biden and the other people, he had the understanding to get it because it was a bit like a business deal. He said, we're going to demonstrate something so you know something, and then you don't do it in the future, because the message was, he didn't say it, but the message was, see what we did without hurting anybody. If you murder one of our leaders again with your drones, thousands of American soldiers are going to die. And so kind of was getting the same warning from some people in the Pentagon, I expect, that moving away from some of the deep state people who were telling him, go in. It's okay. We'll win. We'll be in Tehran by fall, as John Bolton once infamously said in a speech. Um, Wishful, the walrus mustache fellow. I call him the walrus in my article. Um, and so here came the Iranian attack. 13th our time, I think 14th in West Asian time. And I watched it live. And I watched all the Iron Dome stuff going up, all looking like a lot of man of war stingrays, and just jellyfish. They're like, I describe them like little luminous jellyfish in the distance. They're all flying up there and slowly just going down, not hitting anything. Very expensive. And then what happened is the cruise missiles were fired right at dusk. So they only took maybe 20 minutes to get there because they're ballistic missiles. I don't know how many were fired, but I did notice something that they didn't report until later. A number of those missiles were hypersonic, had hypersonic second stages. And the reason I say that is you'd see this light coming through all the little swarm of guppy, iron dome things, kind of trying to maneuver around, see what's going on. And then they part as this big light comes. And then it looked like it got exploded. But out of the like, oh, they caught that missile. But then out of the explosion came this lightning bolt. That was like at Mach 12 or something, like just so they had put a single stage style main missile stage, ballistic stage, and a second stage smaller, which was the hypersonic. So when it reached the point of targeting the thing, the several miles that were left, it would just go and hit it. And you can't shoot that down. So the Israelis said, oh, they caused a little damage, but they didn't. It was a farce. Nothing happened. We shot all their drones down. And, it was like, we're okay with that. So they're doing the ha ha ha. But then as the days went on, press were saying, well, let's see some of the damage. No, we don't want to show you what the damage is. And eventually they had to admit that the two Nevatim and Ramon, the two air bases near the southern part of Israel, the key air bases of the Israeli forces, were touched by at least Nevatim was touched by at least 5 hypersonic targets were taken out. They were hangars. And so it's, as Scott Ritter made me aware of, and all of us in his shows and his interviews, that I did not know that NORAD, the whole NORAD nuclear defense missile system for conventional nuclear war, is a network that expands across Canada and the United States. And apparently its farthest outposts in the network, global American network, were those 2 bases. And that and Nevatim especially had the most sophisticated radar systems to track missiles even from beyond the horizon. So, and 5 of these missiles hit. They touched NORAD, not even stopping it. The drones the drone's job was to be sacrificed. So you had all these Jordanian, and you had all these American, Jordanian, and British jets from Cyprus, maybe some French too. They're all coming in, and they're taking out these $5,000 to $10,000 a piece drones with $100,000 missiles or $200,000 missiles. And so I watched some of that too, the drones getting shot, but the drones were picking up intelligence. Their job was actually to see where the Israelis had placed everything because the firing shows them, and they were sending mountains of data back before they were burnt out by overly expensive missiles. Now Iran knows the whole system that Israel has. So it was an intelligence victory. That means if it happens again, all the bases, all the batteries, all the locations of where things are, the control centers, they know where they are now. Because the Israelis threw everything they had. In fact, they expended half of the missile firing that they could. You know, well, the situation is you can't have all your missiles next to your targets, your batteries. So, you know, there's a lot of missiles and bullets and all of that that are piled near the batteries so that the so if they expended half of that, which means the if this were a every night affair, if the Iranians kept coming with missiles, which they can, they have tens of thousands of them. The Iron Dome, which can't strike any of that anyway, they're only good for striking Hamas missiles. They would run out of Iron Dome, and then the Israelis would run out of American-built missiles to shoot things down. It's very expensive to replace. And they would be in the middle of having to haul the stuff out of the reinforced bunkers, which means they might be also discovering where those are, the Iranians, and blowing them up as well. So if there was a missile war like Iran suffered with Iraq during the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s, Israel wouldn't last a week. Its missiles arsenals would be exhausted. Its missiles would be exhausted, and it would take the Americans, just as the Ukrainians are experiencing, that with all the huge stuff that we gave them, and it's all rusting and destroyed on Ukrainian battlefields, to the point where NATO is in a crisis of its own. Its industry does not have the ability to rebuild it quickly. And so that was something I think the Israeli intelligence people had to look at. The other thing that happened was the 8200, that Mossad special witnessing post on the Golan Heights, was wiped out by Iranian supersonic, hypersonic missiles, and killed 44 Mossad agents. Nobody's talking about it, but it's in the mainstream of either stream. It's like it's spy stuff, you know. When there's a lot of spies die, no one talks about it, but the evidence is out there that that was the answer to all the people that probably worked on the Damascus attack on April Fool's Day are probably all dead. But the Israelis won't talk about it because then it would expose the fact that they did it, that it was premeditated, and it was a thing they premeditated a long time, which is a war crime. And and a cause for giving Iran cause to actually have done much worse, like go full-scale war on them, which they wouldn't do because the Israelis have nuclear weapons. Now, then we're all waiting for several days for the Israeli response. And as usual, you got Netanyahu up there and he's saying, oh, whatever, we hit hard. And interestingly enough, not pointing out the fact that they hit first, that started this whole ball rolling. They just kind of erase that and just talk about, well, they hit us, we'll hit them back. And so I was like, oh God, what are they going to do? Fire their Jerichos? Are they going to make a nuclear demonstration on Tehran or something like that? I mean, even before October 7th last year, and how this whole thing has gotten really screwy, almost like biblical James Jones cultishness in a lot of what's coming out of the Israeli command and the Israeli politicians. Um, it's kind of, I'm seeing Jerusalem become Jonestown, and Reverend Jim Jones is any number of his cabinet, especially Ben Gvir and these other people are just real pieces of work. And so, but then nothing happened. It was the 19th or 20th of April, the final day, 19th into the 20th. And it was a big nothing burger. There was just a few drone. First, everything was broadcasting in a classic mainstream media way, which I knew was just a whole lot of opera and not real. Oh, they're coming! There's fires here. Iranian cats are mating with Iranian dogs, and it's all terrible. And then a few hours later, when people were trying to follow that up, well, what happened? No, we didn't. No, nothing happened. Nothing happened. The press just was mum about it. The only thing you could find was some footage from the distance over Isfahan in central Iran, where some quadricopters were trying to attack a base around there. And I thought, well, good. Maybe this is like what happened with Trump. We hit you, you hit us, because even the Iranians said after they attacked, they said, look, that's our attack. We're not going to go any further with it. We had our demonstration. As far as we're concerned, the issue is over. You hit us, you slapped us, we slapped you back. Now we're all good. They literally said that. But, and then when it didn't happen, I was thinking, well, maybe we came to the abyss one more time and backed off. Can't quite, I even talk about it in an essay in this article. So it's one thing to constantly talk about the Samson option, that since Israel has been a nuclear power unofficially, the Samson option has come up as, and we've talked about it before, it's the whole, again, biblical metaphors here, and with the nuclear war possibility. If Israel's collapsing, it's being attacked on all sides, and you can see how that possible scenario can happen, because right now they're fighting on 5 fronts when they can only really fight on 2, Hezbollah and Hamas. But now you have Hezbollah, Hamas, the Yemenis, and Syria. You are interdicting things in Syria. The Israelis are attacking Syria. I mean, Damascus, the embassy, Syria, and Iraq, with the Iraqis even firing some missiles back. So you have all these different fronts. And which Israel can't win on that. The other factor that's very important, I think we talked about before, is since October 7th, as many as 400,000 Israeli citizens have left in the last 6 months Israel to use their dual passports. And it's not likely that they're coming back. So this is and the 100,000 Israelis that are out of their businesses and homes in the northern end, and probably another 100,000 in a similar state from southern Israel that have to stay away from Hamas areas. And the fact that the Yemenis, even the U.S. Navy can't do anything to them, and the Yemenis are successfully fighting with their missiles a blockade that economically is approaching bankruptcy for Israel. Things are a stressful, dangerous place, and as we'll talk about a little later, perhaps, right now there's this idea that Benny Gantz is never been a friend of Netanyahu, and now he's kind of making a stand in the next few weeks, if a certain post-war plan is not drawn out of what they're going to do with Gaza, he'll resign, and that means the war government will collapse. And of course, I think there is a post-war. I don't know if Benny Gantz is trying to fool himself or not. I mean, there is this government of Netanyahu has made very clear to me at least, what the post-war plan is. And I'll just deal with this just a bit here before I go back to the bombshell of Mr. Escobar. Right now, Israeli settlers are knocking all the food off the trucks. If they're coming in from Jordan, they're doing the same thing in the West Bank. There is a rebellion against food getting there. The this struggle that's going on with Biden and his, I'm going to withhold some of your weapons if you keep doing this. Of course, it's just so pathetic because um, there's another about a bunch of weapons that are going to come through the Congress to Israel that can do the same genocidal things that are being done. So the whole thing in so this fight, they're going back in. Israelis are losing a lot of men again, like they did before, because they are not defeating Hamas. And if they've defeated two-thirds of the 40,000 people that are direct fighters of Hamas, please show me the bodies. Show me they're not showing the bodies. It's like you would think they would really be wanting to show us, look at this pile of guys here. These are the people. Here's the way we could prove it. Here's the tunnels we flooded. No footage because it's bullshit. And so they're losing in the streets. They turn Gaza into a ruin, into a Stalingrad. I mean, it was the same mistake the Germans did when they decided to just bomb Stalingrad. In a couple days, they turned it into a ruin. The most effective Luftwaffe bombing raids that ever happened in World War II. And even England never saw such a thing in the Battle of Britain. And of course, what that does is a ruined city is a much easier city to defend because you've turned the order of a city and its streets and its buildings and its windows where people would be poking out to fire on you. You've turned it into a ruin, a chaos, with debris blocking roads and things. You've just created a perfect chaos for a smaller force to wage war with you. And I did a study of the casualty rates of the Germans, and they literally, when they're walking to Stalingrad, because they'd only been trained to fight in open battlefields, big aero offensives in the country, avoid cities, and they're all walking in. The Soviets were saying, my God, they're walking, they're not even hunched down. They're walking in, standing up, walking right into Stalingrad. And they lost like 600 people sniped in the first day that they came in. And during all the fighting that happened in the city before the second phase of Stalingrad happened, when the Soviets in the winter encircled Stalingrad and the Sixth Army, the loss of dead um, and wounded from street fighting, it cost the Germans 60,000 casualties to learn how to fight street urban war. They had to learn as they went and make their mistakes and lost 60,000 men. And the Israelis are losing thousands. We don't know. No one wants to talk about how many have died, but I mean, I was watching the helicopters pouring out of the area, going to hospitals again, full of a bunch of wounded people. And so Hamas is winning that. They're playing the Soviets in the ruins of Stalingrad. And unfortunately, the civilians are the sacrificial martyrs of all of this. And the other thing that's very clear now is that the Netanyahu government's post-war concept is, I see it at least, hate to say, they were going to starve everybody out. Already, hundreds of thousands of people, lots of children, are at the grave state of starvation. And now, when they say, "Oh, we got 19 trucks a day coming into northern Gaza," you need 500 a day, or else it's a little shell. So they're turning it into Leningrad. The Gaza Strip is being turned into Leningrad, where starvation of the 3 million Soviet citizens of Leningrad during the siege of Leningrad in World War II, the Germans decided not to go and fight in the urban sprawl of Leningrad, but to cut it off and let the people starve. And the Israelis, once again, are great students of Nazis, and they're using, unfortunately, the same tactics in Gaza. And so, a lot of the news is blacked out. It's hard to get information out. The little that I can see, that people are getting thin and the children are getting thinner. And when you understand that of the 2.4 million, I always round it off to four because they say 2.3, but it's really very close to four, or it was. I could probably say it's 2.4 now because I could tell you that I'll just make this prediction. I hate this prediction. I want it to be wrong, but there's a whole lot more than 42,000 dead Palestinians, men, women, and children. It's much more now. And I think the only way we're ever going to know how many people died is if they do a count of the living at the end of this. And then if the others are gone, well, they're under the rubble and I'm even seeing, I just saw today, where there's some areas where some cameras are walking down similar ruined streets I've seen, and there's skeletons all over the street. People that are already not being counted. It's awful. It's I don't know if the Jewish state can survive what it is doing to survive. But that's a whole other can of worms. Um, that what I can say is that the aim of this government is to starve the people out, and if they can manage to keep this thing slow, even that pier thing that the U.S. Navy is doing, it's trickling in. It's all looking like, oh, we're trying to do something. Look at us. Oh, pat ourselves. We're doing so good. They're not getting enough food in there. They've actually so it is it's likely that a million people could die of starvation, the way that if this keeps going and if the world keeps looking away. And I just have to say one thing also that's not being reported fairly. I'm a bit happy about what's happening because it's something that Strauss and Howe, in their Fourth Turning books and the New Millennials, and now Howe, Strauss has since died, but Howe is still working and we are in the Fourth Turning. It's a new book. I have the link in my articles for people to look at it. The crisis point in an 80-year cycle of American history is the Fourth Turning. And last time I won't go into all the stages, how it rises in the good times and goes down to bad again. But the last time we had this happening was in the 1930s and 1940s, which was the Great Depression into the rise of fascism and the whole world having to fight the Holocaust and all of that. So that's what happened last time. We are now in the fourth turning, right in the middle of it, and in the 2020s. So our Great Depression is coming. It's more of the West than the rest of the world, but it's coming this year and the next year. And that's because of the U.S. dollar losing its ability to be weaponized because people are now working on an alternative world order, not the rules-based order, which is any rules we want to cook up at the moment that is only helping us and not the rest of the world. And so the global majority of the world is moving away from all that, and very rapidly, as I predicted it would be. And I think the most important thing that's going to happen is not the U.S. election as much, or the run-up to it, but October of this year in Kazan, when the BRICS nations gather together. We may actually hear before that they are already got the plan of an alternative currency arrangement that is not weaponized, that even America, if it wanted to be a part of it, could be a part of it. But you have to be part of the community. You can't be the guy saying, I'm the biggest, most special person in this community. And whatever I do or say, you all got to follow. Well, that's not being in community with anybody. And so that guy, it's like the world is kind of going, nah, with you. Oh, what about the bonds you have to sell? Nah. What about my IMF that you have to follow? No, we're going away from that too. You guys don't in the West have any credibility anymore with global majority, as it's being called. And so that's going on. Now, I thought back to this Cuban Missile Crisis potential that we had in April. I thought as April ended that okay, well, no, first before that, the bombshell. Pepe Escobar gets this message from his sources 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, tried and tested. And he keeps stressing that in Asian culture, if you have sources like this, they don't lie. Now, maybe they're being fed from the source lies, but they will tell you what they were told. And he's had these guys talking with him for decades. So when they showed up and when he was able to get corroboration, the story basically was, I just couldn't quite believe that Israel was just going to call it a day when the Iranian thing happened, because the whole thing is we've got to hit back. I mean, it's always been the way. Even if you don't want to do it, it's in your DNA, it's in your musculature. And I thought I saw and then so when I found out what Pepe found out, because he told people in the alternative media, basically, long story short, Israel was going to launch an F-35 armed with a tactical nuke in its bomb bay, so the stealth technology would mask it. It was flying out of across Jordan, and somewhere either over Jordan or just when it was entering the deserts of Iraq, it was shot down by the Russian Air Force. Now, Mercury in retrograde here. A lot of really smart people I really admire were presuming things. If it's the Russian Air Force, it must have been a jet. Maybe it was, but they're all running. Well, how can a jet do all that? I said, well, the Russian Air Force is also an aerospace force. It has missiles. It has submarines, that fire from the sea. Red Sea's probably got a few Russian submarines in it. I know there's a whole flotilla around the Red Sea of the Russian Navy and its naval air forces. So anyway, but it just looked, and there are some really weird things, like why would you send an F-35 to create some kind of, the message was that the response that Israel is going to do was a EMP explosion, high atmosphere above in space, that would have, you got to get hundreds of miles to make it really work, like 200, 300 miles of over Earth. An EMP pulse from a large warhead could have fried all the electrical grids of Iran. Now, I'm thinking, if this message is true, I think some of the good sources got some, either the retrograde made them, the danger of hyperbolizing a message like this. It's just like in prophecy. One always has, the person who's trying to interpret a vision of the future, it's a very understandable human weakness to over exaggerate the vision. It happens a lot. Even Nostradamus does it, I contend. I mean, because I do this work, you can't work in prophecy without also being a seer. You have to learn, you can't know what a prophet goes through unless you also have some talent in this. It's just like I've said in shows before, if to be an expert on love, you have to work diligently never to have fallen in love. If that's the litmus test, then you cannot study objectively the subjective. You have to work from within the subjective. You have to fall in love. You have to have the impossibilities of love be a part of your life. Very subjective, changing, all that, not be this person, all objective and scientific, dealing with something of the heart and something of the soul. And so so all of us are trying to pick our brain, large people and small people like me in the alternative media, trying to pick our brains about um, what could have possibly happened. And of course, as I said earlier, Scott Ritter and other people got off, understandably, on an idea. I was even trying to work until I said, "Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute." He said bomb, not missile. So, but everybody got off on, well, if you had to do with a missile, then the F-35 would have had to have a missile outside of its bomb bay doors that you'd have to fly up and shoot into space to make this burst over Iran work. And of course, the other thing I looked at is the other modus operandi of the Israelis would have been to put a large nuclear device on a Jericho regional ballistic missile, launch it. Of course, then everybody would see it. It's not steel. And if it's going on a steep trajectory that's heading over Iran, um, even the Iranians would have been alerted to it. And they would think, oh, they're going for an EMP because it's going too high to come down. It's a straight up, a steep arc, which means it's trying to get what was done in some of the nuclear tests in 1962. I have some pictures of it in some of the articles from Honolulu, 900 miles away. They fired a missile so that it uh, lit off a nuclear bomb at 250 miles above the surface of the Earth to kind of explore what an EMP pulse would look like over the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. Because nobody knew. They had to test it out to find out if the EMP things could do things, whether you had to harden your electronics in case, because if you didn't do that and the other people did, then what would the first bombs that would come in a thermonuclear exchange would be the early bird bombs would be up high in space going off over the United States. And I mean, if you've seen in some fictional movies like the Day After Tomorrow, no, the day after, sorry. It's called The Day After. It was a pretty good movie about a lot of things that would happen in a thermonuclear war. I strongly recommend everybody watch that and another British movie called Threads, which is even fills the holes like Nuclear Winter and other things. And when Reagan saw the movie, he was shocked. And he asked, it was in the 80s. I think it was around
It's like
80,
around 80s. I want to say
83,
84.
84.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and both of them came out in the 80s. And frankly, I think these two movies helped immensely to make people educate people on what a nuclear war is just. And so Reagan was shocked, saw the movie. I mean, it has some parts in it that are just like, my God, like when you see this white flash way high in the atmosphere, like, whoa, and then everybody's cars stop, and in the middle of operation, all the electronics stop and people are trying to get the car to turn around and turn over, and it can't. The celluloid's fried, and all the electronics have gone up. And then what then happens is when the real bombs, then suddenly all the missiles start going off, and everybody, it's Kansas City where it's situated. It's like, what are they doing? Is it a test? No, no, we're doing it. And the Russian missiles will be here in about 25 minutes. And so they did this thing, these shots of the people being skeletonized and disappearing and stuff like that. That just all these people, and they're all gone. It's awful. It's awful. And it's what what Reagan was told by the generals. He said, "Is it really that bad?" And he said, "No, sir. It's
It's
much
worse.
worse than if we go to." And and so and now Threads goes even farther.
I haven't
Even the
seen Threads.
It is actually a better film. Because it takes the story arc of one person, not just during the war, but also the years that follow. And they didn't understand about nuclear winter when The Day After was created, but when Threads happened the following year, I mean, there was already people were looking at it. Sagan was talking about it, Carl Sagan, and then they realized, and of course now what we've learned is that the the level of dust and fire smoke and debris from cities being blown up into the stratosphere by nuclear mushroom clouds, that it will take far less mushroom clouds to cause a nuclear winter than they originally calculated in the 80s. So if you toast 200 cities in South Asia, if Pakistan and India go for it, there will be at least 500 million people killed in South Asia. But it will be enough to cause something that I was writing about even before, looking at Nostradamus, is talking about ice of, well, long story short, a not a nuclear winter, but a nuclear autumn, kind of like what the Indonesian super volcano did. It erupted in 1815, and it started already, and it was like early 1850, so 15. So it had an influence on Napoleon being defeated at Waterloo in 18 in June. It was these cold, driving rains of autumn were happening in June. And it made the battlefields too muddy to start the battle at dawn. It would take to dry off, it would take till around about 11:30. And Napoleon had the Prussian army somewhere on his left flank, had a third of his force trying to block it or track it, keep it away as he fought the Belgians, Netherlanders, and the British under Duke Wellington on Mont Saint Jean Hill Ridge. And so he had to start, because otherwise your cannonballs hit the mud and they don't bounce. The whole thing is to make them bounce and bounce through ranks of men and stuff like that. It was very loamy soil, Belgian loamy soil, and great for growing, not very good for fighting in wet earth. And it was literally like slurry. And so he had to start at 11:30. The Prussians start showing up at 1. And then that's how he lost the battle. But the real impact of that, the following year was called the year without a summer in Europe. It basically, in 1816, it was autumn, an autumnal summer. And, we're talking about the population of Earth in and during the Napoleonic Wars, we had reached 1 billion. And the numbers have been updated. We used to think it was 1830, but it was actually earlier than that now. It's the new numbers the population scientists are saying. So it was bad enough with all the crop failures that killed a lot of people. But in a world of 8 billion people, in a very delicate super system of transporting foods over sea and air, and so the super system of transport, the super system of agriculture, that if India and Pakistan had gone to a nuclear bush war, as I used to call them in Third World Bush War in 1990 book, which was published in 94, called The Millennium Book of Prophecy, but I wrote it in 1990, half of it in India. And so you're talking about another 1 billion people, at least, dying from famine, just from a regional nuclear war of 200 cities going up in flames. It'd be enough to alter the climate, to repeat at least the summer that never happened in 1816. One good thing that came out of that summer was that Byron and Shelley's wife, because they were in Switzerland and they couldn't go outside because it was snowing. And so they decided, because they couldn't go mountain hiking and all that, they'd have this little story battle and they'd find which person wrote the best horror story. And Mrs. Shelley wrote Frankenstein, which is why we were talking before, was a bit based, I think, on the Golem.
So, John, as we're recording this,
Yeah.
CNN reports no survivors found after helicopter carrying Iran's president crashes. State media says that was published 4 minutes ago.
Okay. Okay. Now, question I have to ask is,
That was
CNN is one
CNN.
of,
That was CNN.
yeah, CNN is one of the worst sources for news at this time. So the question I have is, what I would do if I wasn't doing that, I will do it later, is the most important source to, if there is CNN reporting it or is CNN quoting after the Iranian, Irina and all the other press services or the government of Iran itself making this statement. So if you can find that, then
I'll
uh,
look. I'll look into
which is a little weird that they're saying no one survived, because what are these then two
it.
people that they've been talking to? You know,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's a good question.
Well, and there was
Unless,
geopolitics. There was this one group called geopolitics, and they were saying hours ago that he was dead, and then the Israeli news were saying he was dead before anyone was talking about it. And that,
they're quoting the state news agency IRINN.
okay. Well, what I would do now is, if I were on X, I would type in the acronym of that, because that is a good source. I use them for pictures and stuff from Iranian views of things. They're good. And go to actually their site and their English site and see if they did actually indeed do that. So this is the kind of stuff that, just for the audience out here, that this is what we do in the alternative news. We do old-fashioned news. We actually, really check it, doubt it, get a couple sources, even if it's some authority figure, especially these days, if it's any authority figure. Now, if they say it, and then if Novosti in Russia says it, and if global news in China concurs, then it's probably true. But then, even then, I'd be watching tomorrow to see them recover the bodies. And they've got a whole army of people up there right now trying to find them. Well, I'll keep talking while you're,
Yeah,
while
yeah,
you're
yeah. I'll look
I'll
into it
keep
while you're
talking.
talking. Yeah.
I'm on a roll here. So I started going back to this Pepe Escobar uh, claim through his sources. Um, I thought I thought maybe the people, it's possible because of what an F-35 really can do, opposed to what everybody assumed it would do for an EMP burst. This is pure conjecture on my part, but just to let you know. But from what I've learned about what an F-35 can do, and I can't confirm that the Israelis have made a tactical nuke that can fit in an F-35, but I know that they have made tactical nukes, many of them, and it would, you know, logic would dictate that the Israelis would be able to build a gravity bomb very similar to the one that is used by the US Air Force and US Navy for their F-35s. And I even have pictures of it in my articles and the bomb bay door and how it works, that the Israelis would have had a similar model, which would mean it would be a between 1 to 10 kiloton um, tactical nuke, a small nuke. But I then looked at the ceiling possibilities of a stealth fighter bomber. Its ceiling is 50 miles, so 50,000 feet. Sorry, 50,000 feet. That's about 9.4 miles. So if it managed to go in the Persian Gulf and cross over into Iran and not get into the U.S. controlled airspace of Iraq, maybe that's where it was going. If it hypothetically was getting out of Jordan, it would not want to cross the Euphrates River. It would try to miss the Euphrates River, go out in the Persian Gulf, because that's where they divide the airspaces that Russia use and the United States use over Syria. But that's just over Syria too. So That was not clearly stated by a lot of the people that I usually rely on. I had to kind of untangle that. But anyway, it has been often when the Israelis talked about it in the ramp up to their retaliation that they were basically going to retaliate on the nuclear programs and bases that Iran has. By the way, Iran, uh, like many countries, like Japan and South Korea and Taiwan, even know how to build atomic weapons. They they have chosen not to unless forced to, and the pressure is very high for the Ayatollah Supreme Commander or Supreme Leader Khamenei, Imam Khamenei, to Ayatollah Khamenei to probably alter his fatwa against atomic bombs. And there's a way that he can change his religious edict to adapt to the situation. If you've got a country that's threatening to wipe out Iran's 81 million people with the only atomic power that's in the area, then the only deterrent is if it's a virtue to defend the Ummah against a group of people that would irradiate them out of existence, the believers of Allah, then it's incumbent upon the believers of Allah to have a deterrent. So if they have the bombs as well, you don't need as many. You, I've had some people like Scott Ritter say you only need 3. He didn't specify what kind of nuke. I think he means something the size of Hiroshima. But you have to have enough to deter Israel from ever using its atomics because you have them. So I think it's highly likely that there's some talk that Iran has already built some and has parked them in Pakistan. And it was interesting, Raisi, the subject of this mystery of the tragedy of the moment, actually was making visits to Pakistan all during this time. And maybe he was trying to check out how the little baby bombs were. And it's possible, I would say, I mean, everybody, even the people were discussing this, I had to ask the childlike question, what makes you all think that Iran hasn't already built them and has the means to launch them on their shahabs? And as I was saying earlier, if the Jericho from Israel had been seen by everybody within moments, within minutes, all of the mobile defenses and underground defenses would have been alerted in Iran, and before that airburst hit 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 central Iran and fried everything out, they will have launched all of the hundreds or thousands of their missiles on Israel. So it's not conventionally, Israel can be destroyed by Iran by conventional means. Um, and so what would be the demonstration would be the end of Israel. But what if your real plan, according to the limitations of an F-35, was to make a very small EMP burst over Natanz, the city about a couple hundred miles to the northeast of Isfahan, which is a major center for subterranean Iranian nuclear program. It's one of the biggest bases. So what if you just wanted to fly in under stealth, flying flying in such a way that when your bomb bay opened, your bomb would follow the trajectory of that. So you kind of throw it at the system. Doesn't have a glide wing, so you have to then go hypersonic, go back towards the west and go as fast as you can out of the region, somewhere around 9,000 feet, I assumed. And then what you do is then this bomb starts dropping. It'll detonate at 7,000 feet. It'll create a huge flat. You do it at night. You would create a fireball over Natanz, miles above it, that would be seen all over the place at night around in many places of Iran. It'd be like some meteor thing happened. And the blast, what I did is I thought, okay, I can't find a map that would give me an aerial version of the blast effects. So I just, and maybe it's the wrong way to do it, but what I did instead is I just took the blast effects. If you're here and the bombs dropped over here, it's lesser, 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 more, more, more. I just tilted it like that and said, okay, if you're launching even at 10 miles or 7 miles, the blast effect would be greatly diminished, but the EMP probably would have fried all the electronics in Natanz that's above ground. So you would have made a very small demonstration, measured in a mad kind of way. And the people that were arguing about this were also saying, well, it wouldn't hurt anybody in EMP. Well, wait a minute. Um, if if you're in cars and you're going down the freeway at 60 and your cars all stop running, you're going to have pileups all over the place. If you're a civilian airliner flying all through the airspace, you may lose your electrical. And if you can't glide to some nearby place, you've got a lot of airlines falling out of the sky. Now, maybe I'm full of it about that. I don't know. I'm just kind of, I didn't have time to really check that out. It's just call it a science fiction possibility. I don't know if civilian liners are hardwired not to have EMP problems. I don't think they are. I didn't have time in getting this out, so if I'm wrong, please correct me. But a lot of people are going to get hurt. And then, of course, if your city's out of power, there's anybody being operated on, people who need dialysis, all these other things will start. We are so plugged into our power systems. How do you refrigerate your food? Now you're all starting to get hungry. You got social unrest because people who get hungry get desperate. And so Natanz would be in a real bad way, but not the entire Iran. And then Israel could say, we said we'd hit you back harder. And, we could do that to all of Iran with our Jerichos, and there's nothing you could do about it.
I
So
just
but that all didn't happen if this story full of Swiss cheese holes, but has this weird way of, I don't know, even Pepe Escobar was the first person to say this is so full of holes, but holes and all, he put it out there because there's some there. I just, I hope I'm wrong, but there's just something about it that, given how the Israelis would have really wanted to respond and scare the Iranians, because what have the Israeli government lost? They've lost the terror and fear that Israel, being a nuclear power, the fear of, what did they lose on the night that the Iranians came in and touched all of their systems with their missiles? They're no longer a threat. What do you do then if you're Netanyahu and Gallant and those guys? You want to restore the fear and respect of the nuclear lord upon us. I fear the nuclear lord of Israeli nuclear weapons. And so you have to do something that hurts, but doesn't really aim to mass kill a lot of people, but takes the power grid out into tons, even though it's not affecting all the subterranean nuclear program, but it's just saying, we can touch you too, and we can knock out your entire electrical. And bring fear back to the Iranians ever think again to launch anything at them. So it's things like this that, and it's the way these people think, that did not surprise me when Pepe Escobar had this crazy story that the Israelis were going to do an EMP launch and nuke. It hasn't been done since 1945 by anybody, openly declaring by their actions that they have them and they'll use them at least to EMP pulse everybody back to the pre-industrial era. And the Russians somehow knew about it, because here's the other side of the story. Just as Ukraine has a lot of agents in Russia, because Russians and Ukrainians are basically Russians, there's a whole lot of Israeli citizens that are used to be Russian Jews, and they still have some affinity for Russia. And I would even say that the FSB has has, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some contact really deep in the Israeli inner circle of governments and all that maybe they found out about this little lone F-35 going to do something over Natanz. They were maybe monitoring the takeoffs and landings of a certain place, and when they saw this certain thing going, they knew where it was going, and they managed somehow to shoot it out of the sky. Now, there's a big bit of evidence that would really prove or disprove all that. It was, if there's wreckage somewhere in the most inhospitable, unpopulated areas where even camels do not go, outside of the Jordanian border, in western Iraqi deserts, there's nothing out there. I mean, the road into the Euphrates region is at least 50 miles away, and it's just nothing. And well, that would make it very easy for an Israeli special forces or US special forces or both to somehow go out there in the middle of nowhere, low under the radars with their helicopters and recover a lot of that and the nuclear device, whatever was left of it, and move it out of there. So
I do remember when covering this that a there was a news announcement of an F-35
yeah.
in the, but I don't remember if there was anything about it being shot down.
Well, you see,
But I do
there's
remember
yeah,
something
yeah, I know
something was in the
there
news.
was like in the fog of war, there was what
Yeah,
about this F-35? There was a little of that too. That's also made me wonder.
because there was the drones were coming in, all
Yeah.
right, and all right, and all right, the drone. So the attack from Iran,
Mhm.
that whatever day it was, uh, all right, the drones came in.
The
There were some
14th.
missiles, yeah, and it was like it took hours. It was really
Well, the
slow,
drones
and
were
then there,
fine, but the ballistics
and then
were launched
right,
late at dusk.
right,
Oh, and by the way, just so I don't forget, because it's an interesting issue that shows respect for religions. The Sabbath, sunset to sunset.
right.
The Iranians made sure that none of the drones or the missiles, which came together at the same time, the drones were going slow, 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 and then they went with the ballistic missiles. They made sure that it happened after sunset. So
Mhm.
it was not, so that was in respect to the Sabbath.
Right. And then there was several days went by
Yeah,
before Israel made their
about five.
counterstrike.
It was around the 19th, my time, 19th, 20th. That's when they did.
Okay. And I remember the day that they did the strike,
Hmm.
that there was a news announcement. I'm thinking
I
BBC.
also, in the
I
fog of it, I
swear there
remember
was
that too.
something about an F-35, but
Yeah.
I don't remember it saying it was knocked down. I just,
No,
that,
it wasn't. It was talked about.
but
Here's the
yeah.
thing. Here's another thing that's important to understand that a lot of Israel makes has been. Oh, well, one thing that's happening. Israel was making bomb runs. I mean, Israel makes bomb runs into Iraq, so it wouldn't be surprising if the U.S., who like to control the airspace over Iraq, look the other way because that's the Israelis. It's just another bomb run.
Mhm.
And so it was somewhat related, as I recall, with Iraq. So it could have been that, or it could have been with them, and then
Maybe
the
cure
guy went his own way, you know, into Iran and
right.
got shot down by a Russian missile. So what that if that's true, it also means that the Russians have intelligence that's quite intimate to the situation, and stealth won't help you in that regard. And because they know your plan, or enough to know where you are when where you'll have to go, and if and I don't. This is one of the big holes, I got to admit. But um, if it's true, then it doesn't rule out the possibility that Russia might make a preemptive attack on the nuclear stockpiles of Israel if it felt that the Samson option was going to be done. The Russians metaphorically would unchain the blind Samson before he can pull those pillars down on everybody.
All right, all right, all right. So you have a pretty strong historical understanding, all right, of many different centuries. Okay, so let me read a couple dates, all right,
Okay.
recent dates, all right, and get your opinion on where this is going. Now, I
Okay.
just want to preface: it's possible that a godhead is intervening. Now, let me just keep that in that, I know that sounds a little kind of, woo
Well,
woo,
I would
but
just simply say,
let's
just in
just,
a little different way, it will be the godliness in us that somehow all these, if it's working, all the, whether it's a personages of God or it's the God spark in us, whatever way people want to look at it, it's okay with me. But the way it will work, I've talked about the 200 people that will be more awake than the average number, and it's enough to change the climate that people want desperately to cross those lines, and they just can't do it. And I'll finish with this interjection once. We've had two, and the Iran thing reacted to, and that could have been a third if this pulse thing with the F-35 was happening. And then we had the whole the Russians saying, "We're done with you playing proxy in this war. If your missiles are being targeted by you into Russia, they openly threaten we will start hitting command and control centers and bases outside of the war theater, including Britain." That's what the Russians said.
Mhm,
That scared a lot of people off. So,
mhm.
so if they do it and the Russians don't do it, that's a mistake of the Russians. I mean, at some point, this dangerous, very dangerous thing has to come to where somebody's got to stop threatening to
I
do it.
was watching a video by
But anyway,
John.
that's enough of mine.
I was watching a video by John Mearsheimer.
Yes, John Mearsheimer is a very good source.
Scheimer, right? All
One of my
right.
older sources.
So I think it was about 2 days ago. Maybe 3 days ago, he did a lecture, a little bit more than an hour and a half at
Yeah, I watched a bit of it.
CSIS. Okay. And so, he's taken the perspective that Israel is at fault and that, there's a genocide that's going on in Gaza and this is not going to play well with Netanyahu and there's going to be a lot of infighting within Israel. And okay. All right. Now, he's applying typical what I call Westphalian international affairs, but not necessarily biblical, assuming that God does intervene, and that just because you're a world power like the United States or even Russia or whoever, or even China,
Or
that
Israel with the bomb.
that would, but that things can go into a chaotic attraction that radically changes the whole game board where one would think that the United States would be a major power player and broker and being able to keep a lid on it, and then all of a sudden it goes so chaotic that it can't. And I think that this is where
Could happen.
Mearsheimer is missing the boat. But all right, let me read the dates. These are
Okay.
recent dates, and give me your perspective on this. Okay, May May 7th. This is all happening this year. May 7th, there was the assassination attempt against the Saudi crown prince.
Yes.
May 13th, Turkish president holds emergency meeting following warning of possible military coup.
Yep. That did happen.
May 15th, assassination attempt on
Piso.
the, yep, the
The
May 6th,
Czechoslovakian, the Slovak, excuse me, my Cold War mind. The Slovakian president was shot.
prime minister, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, 3 times. Yeah, the prime
But he
minister.
survived, right?
It
he
looks like
survived.
he's going to recover, but I mean, I watched it, man. And
Okay.
I'll add to this, that detail of security people sucked. They were all standing on one side of him. They didn't have two people here. They didn't have people in the audience watching hands and eyes. They didn't. I mean, I've been a security person. I was a part of the security in the ashram and also in the Oregon commune. So, we learned some issues of how to do things in security ways. And even at that basic level, I mean, Ritter and all those other people are miles beyond me, but they were even seeing it and said, these, I mean, the bam, bam, bam happened. And then they kind of went, what? You have to be on a trigger. I mean, I'll just tell you one of the things I had to do, just one of the things I'll admit to, is that when in Pune, when we were all sitting in Buddha Hall, there was these two positions on the first row of the semicircle around the podium where Osho was, and there was always two people just dressed like everybody else, but they were guards. And I did that tour duty a number of times, and the whole idea is to be quiet and be centered. But if any unusual feeling or something happens, sounds, whatever, we were supposed to leap up on the podium and take the bullet. And I mean, that's basic Secret Service stuff, because when Hinckley started popping bullets at Reagan and he's walking out of the Ambassador Hotel in 1981, if you watch it, I mean, it was too close. He was too close, so they couldn't do a lot. But there was one Secret Service guy, he stood right in danger's way and he took the bullet and went down. He actually stepped into the bullet to stop it from getting the president. I mean, that you have to be ready to do that. I
Mhm.
certainly would do it for my master. Um, and you don't want to do it, but so I had to always sit there and not get tense and not disturb the moment. But this is an interesting way to meditate. I'm sitting here, and at any moment, I'm going to leap up and get shot or stabbed by a flying knife or something. One time they threw a flying knife. That was before I was there. Um, Interesting meditation. So yeah, anyway,
Okay, so May 16th, citizen arrested for threatening to assassinate the Serbian president.
yeah.
Okay. May 19th, Saudi Arabia's King Salman hospitalized for second time in 4 weeks. And then
Oh
today,
well,
which
he's sick. It's surprising that the King Solomon is still alive. He's had a lot of strokes.
right, right. Okay, and then today, which was the helicopter crash.
Yeah.
So I go back to what I was saying, that there can be chaotic attractions that happen where you think that the world is stable, then all of a sudden it's a fast approach to a world war.
Well, and then the motive in this case is, I mean, Escobar has said this very clearly. How is the powers that be that are basic, and New Caledonia? Let's add New Caledonia to this. What the French army, it was going to go marching like Napoleon III to Metz rather than Russia, but call it. A lot of the French army, I've been watching what's going on in New Caledonia. Basically, the Parliament of France unanimously almost voted in that the French citizens that are living in New Caledonia, if they've been living there for 10 years, have more of a vote than the native people, and who want to have their independence. And New Caledonia is a wreck. It's flames, burning cars, the length and breadth of that long, long island is in chaos right now, and they're like not keep getting the news out and all because France has lost Africa. It's going to soon lose Chad. It's lost all the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all saying get out, and they had to get out. So this is what's triggered Mr. Macron to be as they say in France, tack tack tack. He is that's what's triggered him to be very irrational. And
So so
so so
I'm not
no, but
going.
let me finish it, please.
Okay, okay, go ahead,
I know it's
go ahead.
complicated, but it's The West is losing 500 years of influence on the rest of the human race,
Mm.
losing it fast. Um, European colonialists, the American colonialists, all this is a colonialism that's still there. And now the last vestiges of it are being successfully and easily plucked out by a global majority that now sees it has an alternative, that it can't just always be stuck under the dollar's grip, under the United States' hegemony, under the European, we are the garden, everywhere else is the jungle. No, you're the continent that has the most jungles of war and blood soaking in any continent. It's a bloodthirsty continent, Europe. If you look at a map of all the battles in history, um, there's scattered all through the rest, but if it's white dots on a black map, Europe is brilliant white, with most of the 3,000 wars of the last 2,000 years. And and so this violence, this controlling people, this seeing people as Untermenschen and natives, and and one of the things that is very strong, the outpost of the West is Israel in the Arab world, is literally openly saying these Arabs are subhumans, and just as we, just as the empires, just as we thought the Americans when we colonized the Philippines, all these little woggies running around, it's this whole racist stuff is very much a part of it. So this racial economic control is being threatened. So the BRICS meeting is coming, as I said before, in October, and this is all about ultimately decapitations of the leadership of the BRICS, because the BRICS is the core of something that the rest of the world, everybody wants to join the BRICS. I mean, they're having to say, God, we can't have you all join at once, but they're all gravitating. About 40 countries don't want to be part of the BRICS now. And a number of them are coming in. They're going to bring them in slow because, but, I've been worried about Putin being destroyed when he was going to fly down to South Africa for the last big BRICS meeting. I was thinking he better not go. He'll be flying over a lot of territory where somebody unknown fire a missile on the Russian president's jet and kill everybody. I saw it, and it was looming, and I was saying, God, please don't because this, whether you like the man or not, that'll, I mean, we're talking about a situation here now with if a lot of what Azerbaijan. So, what I see happening is, if you can't and defeat them en masse on the battlefields, if you can't defeat them economically, you will start assassinating them. So it is, and it's kind of an interesting thought to think about, that maybe Nostradamus misread the crown prince, soon to become the king of Saudi Arabia, MBS. Uh, his destiny, I think Nostradamus was unfair on about two of the three antichrists that looked like having Hitler. He was spot on with the Hitler history, but Napoleon, wow, uh, Nepal, that his anagram for Napoleon. As I was saying before, Napoleon did a lot of really good things too, but not that a royalist would appreciate what he did. Revolutions, mass freedom of the vulgar plebs. I mean, Nostradamus had his prejudices. He had a prejudice against Islam. He had a prejudice against, he was a staunch divine right of kings guy. So his all his views that look very negative about the future, they're talking about mass rebellions and all. Well, he's disparaging America and France and all the people movements that happen because they're peasants. I mean, he's a 16th century man. Most people try to interpret Nostradamus from their own 21st century biases, but you have to become in your head studying the way people thought and lived in the 16th century in France. You have to learn how to think and be prejudiced and do all the hopeful in a future that you would like rather than the one you're seeing where divine kings would rule and all that. You have to you have to get into the head of prophets because they are the soup strainer, they are the tea strainer. Any pure vision of water that passes through this tea strainer full of the grit of expectations of a certain period of time, including our own, will come out tasting like that tea. So you have to be able to know that when you look at prophecy. Um, so this is what makes this so dangerous, this situation now. It's like 1914, only compared to the leaders of Europe that stepped with their wide eyes open right into those disasters, those tripwire treaties and counter treaties that had them all not wanting to go to war. They all ended up in a month after Archduke Franz Joseph's son, the emperor's son, died in an assassination. That assassination, and a month later, started World War One, and the first truly modern, terrible, high industrial slaughter of human beings. And it so those leaders, compared to the leaders in the West we have now, were geniuses compared to the idiots that we have running, the idiots with the nuclear weapons in Britain, in France, and in the United States. And I see this a chaos pattern. We're coming soon, when the Ukrainian line starts to unravel, and it is right on schedule, according to how I've seen it and written about it, in May, around the 15th to 21st. Now the Russians are taking like 30 kilometers a day. It's slowly becoming the Richmond Petersburg line that Robert E. Lee was forced to dig 35 miles from Richmond to St. Petersburg because Grant had 3 times more men and he had all the equipment and stuff. And so they were basically a pitchfork race, shovel and pitchfork. And it was a race to see where the Army of Northern Virginia would run out of men to guard the line. And then Grant would keep moving his reconnaissance and force of cavalry and infantry beyond the line, see if they could turn the right flank of Lee. And finally, it happened at Five Forks. Um, it broke through. Lee had held that line with his men for 9 months and 2 weeks and a few days. He managed to hold it static. People were saying about that war what they're saying in the press about this one in Ukraine. Oh, it's a stalemate. Oh, there's no movement. Where are the big movements? Everybody's fixated on territory because they don't learn what the Russians are fixated on. They're fixated on von Clausewitz. Prussian military thinkers from the 19th century that made it clear conquering cities and lands like Kharkov. Like I said, we're not going to take Kharkov. No, they're not going to take Kharkov. They're going to destroy the Ukrainian army first. And when there's no Ukrainians left to fight, they can walk into Kharkov, to Kiev, to Lvov, to Odessa. You defeat the army, you destroy the army, and then you get the country. You don't fight for cities and do all that. And the Russians, that's doctrine to them. And like the Americans and the British thinkers, they will willfully, to the potential end of this species, willfully ignore these realities of the Russians. They have an idea who the Russians are that they've had for centuries. The Teutonic Knights had the idea when they attacked Novgorod in the 13th century, and they got wiped out by Alexander Nevsky all the way back in the 13th century. People in the West had an idea about Russia that is literally in their DNA now. They just can't shake it. And Biden is of European stock, and a lot of the people around him are, so they have it too. And So what is, so that, and then the next big thing was Charles XII in 1700 in the Great Northern War. He invaded Russia through Ukraine, the soft underbelly of Muscovy, and he also got wiped out. He had an idea about the Russians, and then there was the army of 20 European nations that Napoleon massed 600,000 strong in 1812 that invaded Russia. And even Napoleon, I've read his memoirs, he said, I just can't figure out the Russians. He's at least honest enough to say that. The pattern always is Russia's too big. We want their resources, and and we need to break it up. Even this idiot that runs the little itty bitty Estonia was openly saying the other day, "Oh, I think we'd be better for everybody if Russia was just broken up. It has all these different republics and stuff inside. Why don't we just make it all little countries like us, and then everything will be fine?" Well, that's what everybody like Napoleon, like Hitler, like the Americans and the Pentagon had a plan, a potential plan if we had the only nukes in the world. And after the war, that by 1950 we might actually break up the Soviet Union with a little bit of bomb dropping and invading. That's a plan. I've seen it. It's no longer a secret plan anymore. So the Russians know this. The Russians have known this since the 13th century, and it's in their DNA that Europe and European minds want to destroy them and take everything, and they froze their bank assets, and and the Americans, Europeans think all these moves will work. All these Napoleonic, Hitlerian, Charlesian, Teutonic Knightsian things are going to work. They don't. And the other thing too is, I just had this thought today, and I pose it for the first time to everybody on this show. Name me one time when the Russians unilaterally invaded Western Europe to conquer it. You will find no times. Even the issue with Poland comes from the fact that the Livonian Empire developed into the Lithuanian Polish Empire, which at one point stretched all the way to Moscow during the time of troubles. Also, I think in around the 13th or 14th century, the time of troubles. I'm not sure about that, but and the Russian people lost half of their population from that decade. And what then happened as consequence is what Russia did to Nazi Germany was done to this empire. It took centuries, but Russia took it back. And at that time, the Poland was part of it. They didn't choose to. It was a response to being invaded. The Soviet Union didn't have a plan to conquer Europe. In fact, I know for a fact that after the war, Second World War, some generals came to Stalin and said, "Hey, why don't we just take, so we never have let's just subjugate the Germans and the French and all these people and just take the Western Europe and let's get this thing over with." The kind of one-sided Ernest LeMay kind of thinking of the Cuban Missile Crisis is military minds in Russia, and then who just, oh, we'll just drop the bomb on them, they won't do anything. Now Stalin, puffing on his pipe, he said, yes, but in this conquest, who's going to feed us? Our farms are destroyed. Our cities are in ruins. We've lost 27.5 million people. That means we entered this war with 170 million people. And if you kind of affect that there would be replacements from birth, because the argument used to be, oh well, world wars are good because they depopulate the world and make it less crowded. And I used to hear this all the time in Rolling Hills High School from my fellows in high school. And I said, yeah, well, I guess it depends on who gets cut, and if it's you, it's not fair, is it? And then anyway, this one guy kept getting on me with it, and I said, you know what, I did a study after what you said about depopulation of the world. Are you aware that in the 6 years of World War II, with the loss of 60 million people, that the mean population of Earth increased by 250 million? So it just slowed it down a little. Maybe the curve just went a little flatter. But then after the war, it was a baby boom too. So
Mhm.
it just doesn't happen in modern times like that. And the only kind of war that would work in that would be the war that no one will have a civilization surviving from, and that would be a thermonuclear war. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. Or um, or something else that's a subject for another discussion. But the very concerning thing I'm seeing, I will be finishing my book on Nostradamus's plague prophecies and what he had to say about the the certain problem that happened back in 2020 through 2021 that shall not be named. You know what I mean, you know. Oops, somebody's pointing at my shoulder here. And um, there there are there are things developing from that little experiment that have ramifications for the future population of humanity. That I'm looking at this thing now. I don't like what I'm looking at, but that's for another night. Um, so issues of population crashes are very likely as part of this chaos that's happening in the longer term. But certainly, if you ask Ukraine about population crashes, their population is maybe under 20 million now. It used to be a country of 35 million, 7 million people have left, not wanting to come back. There's a whole lot of young men that are dying trying to cross the Danube River and get out from literally being sacrificed all across Ukraine. These gangs of military police who are they're not bribed to stop grabbing. They're just grabbing people off the streets. I've watched a lot of footage of it. You will see it on X. You will see it. You won't see it on the mainstream news, but and a lot. So Ukraine is an example of what can happen to a lot of places. Politically, it's about to collapse, um, and it may politically collapse before even the army collapses sometime in the summer. But anyway, so back to Lee. Lee gets in Five Forks. He's finally the line after 9 months, over 9 months, held its ground. Nobody budging, just wars fighting on the trenches. When the line unraveled, it did in less than 3 days, all 35 miles of it. And the Army of Northern Virginia were on the roads to Appomattox, trying to get to Lynchburg, trying to cross the James River and maybe there was supposed to be a lot of supplies waiting for them in Lynchburg. So everybody was marching to Lynchburg. And as they're being hounded on all sides by a much larger Union force of Ulysses S. Grant's men, and they were 20 miles from the James River when they were finally surrounded. And then Lee had to surrender to the Army of Northern Virginia and disbanded, beginning the beginning of the end of the Confederate States of the United States, returning back into the Union. Um, Five Forks, I had this kind of leap of inspiration. I said, well, there are Five Forks poked potentially in the Ukrainian lines. And what's this thing happening north of the main lines, north of Kharkov? This is the Russians reading their Civil War military history. They are these buffer zones. They're not going to go into Kharkov. They're going to make a buffer zone and then they're going to entrench it. And the Ukrainians are doing exactly what uh, Grant wanted the Confederates to do. They've stopped the advance in some places, but to do that, Syrskyi, the commander of the Ukrainian forces, had to pull platoons, companies out of the entire eastern Ukrainian line, thinning it out. And that's exactly what the Russians wanted them to do. They're going to extend that line all the way over so that the Ukrainians have to man it all the way to where their actual major lines are. Sumy, next west of Kharkov, is about to also do that, if not do a direct attack, and there's nobody guarding that. And in Chernigov, I use the Russian names because I frankly think they're all going to go, but not Chernigiv anymore, Kiev, or it's going to be Kiev and not Kharkov, because that's the future of this. These lands are returning to the Ruski Mir, the Russian world. And so what's going to happen then is you got a whole northern front that the Ukrainians are going to have to man in some way. And so you have a super Richmond Petersburg line. We're talking about a couple thousand kilometers. It's a bigger war and there's more men involved, but it'll have the same effect. There will be then five forks. There'll be a piercing from the Kharkov line, the Sumy line, the Chernigov line. So the first three forks poking the pie and deflating Ukraine's ability to defend itself. And then there's two major forks, Kupiansk and the two-pronged fork of Chasiv Yar in the central part of the Donbass front. And Chasiv Yar and Horlivka, Cherentia, or something like that. That's the farther south towards the Adivka breakout that's been happening since February. These are the places where the forks are going to pierce the line. And when it happens, probably in June, definitely in July, it'll be a very dramatic unraveling of the Ukrainian line, just like what happened to Robert E. Lee. And the James River will be replaced by the Ukrainian forces trying to get across the Dnieper River, which divides Western Ukraine from Eastern Ukraine. And they may not, and the difference is they're not only going to be attacked from behind, they're going to be attacked from the air in the modern war, and there'll be a lot of highways of death that the Ukrainian army is running over, just like what happened to the Germans when they tried to get back to the Ukraine in the Ukraine front of World War II, desperately trying to get to Dnieper to make a defense there. There's also a possibility that when they get to the Dnieper, the Russians have used their hypersonic missiles to take down all the bridges. And then three-quarters of the Ukrainian army is trapped and unsupplied on the wrong side of the Dnieper, with a force of Russians that can very easily create a network of pontoon bridges if they wish to cross over and take the rest, which they are compelled to do. They don't want to do it. But here's what then happens. This gets about this chaos factor. It goes beyond this desperate attempts are being committed. I mean, I do see a correlation to Fiso being shot and to the assassination attempt on the Crown Prince, and the we don't know yet. There was a lot of dumb things that apparently happened. Why were they even using a small helicopter to fly over those mountains today, even though it was close to the Iranian border where this dam was that him and the president of Azerbaijan were Raisi and him were dedicating. But that was a dumb move because I tell you this, if Israel is the 51st state of the United States, as some people jokingly call it, in fact, there's even signs in Israel say, "Hey, we're that close to the United States." Azerbaijan is a province of Israel. It's very deeply infiltrated by Mossad. Israeli soldiers are there. For Raisi to even step out of Iran to even be there, the chance, what a great cover. Oh, he just crashed in the mountains. You know, I mean, there's a lot of spy stuff that
So
could be
so you
taken.
think it's an assassination? It was an
It could
assassination and
be.
not the just the weather. See, I take it this way. I don't think it was an assassination, but I do think that there are events that are taking place worldwide
Hmm.
that it seems that there's a hand of God in it. And that we think that we are in control of these events that are happening in 2024, but I don't think we are. And I think that, but that may be a little bit too metaphysical for many people to digest. But
Well, it cuts both ways. Chaos creates order. So chaos is very necessary, a part of stability. The antithesis of stability is, and we're in a period where a certain kind of stability, which has been dominating the world for 5 centuries, is rapidly coming to an end. So that is creating a world of chaos,
mm,
which will and there's always, when something new happens, even a new idea, even in something as simple as somebody having a new idea, you'll find that new ideas, even if they are better ideas than the ideas we are familiar with all their faults, people are programmed to resist change. And I mean, I think we could have had, if there's been inventions that I've been tracking down for my book on the climate change prophecies, that I mean, I've documented them. They really happen. There's people that, like the guy who could run an engine on water and get like 100 miles a gallon. That goes against the profit margin of the more defunct and wasteful system of only 17% of gasoline actually being used that you put in your engine. The rest goes out in the ecosphere. It's the most, I mean, there's a simple thing is why not create a more efficient engine? Well, that means that certain people that make a profit off of stupidity and backwardness will lose their jobs. Of course, it would be incumbent upon a society that was really, it's like this. Doctors deep down don't really want to heal people, because if everybody's healed, then they don't have a job anymore. And the way the society's set up, the society will pat you on the back, go, good luck with that. Whereas a society that's more forthsightful, which knows that it's going to change things by developing better ways, like actually making people more healthy, making people more long living. Um, all these are going to cause other challenges. Uh, if people live 350 years on average, which is very possible, um, then you cannot have the same wasteful society of us fast living, polluting people, because even 100 million, even a billion people that are living 350 years are going to be a different kind of strain on on the earth. So, but the other thing too is there should be, a society should take away the fear of people that, well, if we improve things, I'll be out of a job. Like the cop will say, well, then I can't be a policeman anymore. Well, then what's the doctor going to do? I mean, I think I've said it on the show already. There's an old Chinese way they did it. You have to pay the doctors when you're healthy. It won't be too much. It won't be this gouging that's going on, but it would be basically the Chinese practitioners in ancient China, they were paid only when you were healthy. So the whole profit margin changed from keeping you sick, and managing sickness really became managing health. Like the doctors motivated us to help you live better and eat better and live longer, because that his job is to keep you healthy, not his job is to fix the wreck that you made of your life by not being healthy. And so that's just one way to rethink it. I have a book that I'm putting together called The Book of Things to Come. And it's the final chance that I have to do all my distant prophecy writings about stuff that I've been notating and leaving since I was in high school. That will now get out in essays in this book, which take basic themes of life and takes them 4,000 years into the future. Some of them won't go that far, but some will. And, it's like health, economy, politics, sex, life expectancy, war, how does war become peace? All these fundamental things. Another one of the essays is how you teach history. You don't put the emphasis on the heroically insane. You talk about the people who tried to become more loving, more intelligent, more innovative, more artful, more creating beauty rather than war. You have all that other stuff in the background as the stage, but the emphasis of our history is completely over endowed with all the nut jobs and the warriors and all the people destroying things and all the politicians and stuff, and not the people who bring light to our history. So it's perpetuating the repeating of stupid. And so there will be an essay about that too. There will be an essay how you solve the problem of the Israelis and the Palestinians and all Arabs and Jews and the children of Abraham. That's my Abraham conspiracy essay, which I've been planning for years before all this stuff hit the fan. So, so um, I think it's too soon to, I mean, the presumption we all have if a divine hand is doing it is always got a bit of our program bias, all of us, including myself. I mean, there's one of the things I took away from the movie The Longest Day was this wonderful thing that was documented. It actually happened. There was a German assistant general played by Kurt Jurgens on one side, and I think it was John Wayne playing the guys that were going to go jumping into Normandy from their airplanes, parachuting. And at one point, both men in the story, because they had both sides, really well done, the movie. And at one moment, here's John Wayne saying, "Sometimes I wonder what side God is fighting on." And then there's a part later in the movie when things are going bad for the Germans, and then you got Kurt Jurgens going, he says it in German, "Sometimes I wonder whether they're Gott, what side God's Gott is fighting on." Um, so that always in all of us, in looking at this divine hand of thing, look at the very human expectation the divine hand is going to move for us and not the other people. So and unfortunately, people in power in this current Israeli government are really stuck on the divine hand. It's with us, because you know we're the seed of Abraham that counts, not the equal seed of the people that were starving to death over a few miles away. And the other thing too is about mainstream media. I'm discovering from my Israeli sources that Israeli news is not reporting much at all about what's going on in Gaza, the massacres, the starving, and stuff like that. They're keeping a lid on it for the people of Israel. They don't want people to know because I think there's a number. I mean, look what happened. Look what happened when Netanyahu was trying to change the court system so that in the new interpretation of the basic law of the Israeli state, the Jewish state, you could like overrule the courts. Um, there were some people ready to go to a civil war over that. I mean, this is the other factor that Israel may be facing is while they're fighting all these people left, right, and center, insinuating themselves in wars with people, they might have a civil war inside their own borders to deal with. It'll be a minority, but it'll be an armed minority like the rest of Israel. I mean, everybody's got a gun. Some people who are in the army, they still walk with their M16 slung over their backs wherever they go. So, it would be, since Israel is kind of like attempting to be a Jewish Sparta, although not as well trained as the Spartans, they're armed like Sparta. And if there's a civil war in Sparta, everybody's got a gun, everybody's got a spear, uh, so even if it's a small minority, it was scary enough to actually make Netanyahu back off. Um, but so yes, there is. I'm looking at the clock. Probably we should wind it down. Now we downloaded a lot of stuff. Did you see anything else on the communiques while you were looking while I was blabbing away? Was there
Well,
any
I wasn't able to go onto the Iranian website, but I've been watching Al Jazeera, and they're definitely, saying that he died, and
Al
they're
Jazeera is
doing a
actually
new,
a pretty good source.
yeah, so they're playing some old clips of him right
Yeah.
now, but yeah, it's a real thing that happened. Now, how it evolves, I don't know, but
Well,
I just have this feeling that it's one of those moments in time. It's like you can uh, history had a certain path, and it was going down a certain path, and all of a sudden something chaotic happens, and
yeah.
then all of a sudden it's radically different. And I feel like this is one of those moments.
Oh, yes,
Yitzhak Rabin, when he
this
was
whole year has been
assassinated,
like this.
yeah, when Yitzhak Rabin was
That was,
assassinated, that was another moment where the timeline shifted.
you know what I did that day?
Oh,
I, when I heard about it, I was living back in Seattle at that time. The moment I heard about it, I fell on the floor, sobbed. I just sobbed. I just said, "Oh man," I just felt it. I hadn't been hit like that since I was a little boy, and on November 22nd, Kennedy was shot, and it had the same feeling. Uh, Everything is going now in a different direction, not a good one. And I felt that I think that the moment that Yitzhak Rabin was shot in the back by a fanatic Jewish West Bank settler who was very much admired and even part of Ben Gavir's gang. Remember, I said about how Ben Gavir, when he was younger, there was a shot of him. It was the same thing I saw in one of Abby Martin, great Jewish American documentary. And uh, I have links in this current set of things to her stuff. She's amazing and very brave. And but he had this it was either that or it's in DD. It was in the DD Democracy link, another good source that I have on X. But anyway, there was Ben Gavir, and he says, "Guess what? This is during the elections of that when Netanyahu was going to overtake him. If he couldn't do it by the ballot, he did it by the bullet." And here's Ben Gavir, younger, less salt and peppery, a little not so fat. Um, he's pulling out this thing out of his pocket. He says, "See this? It was a Cadillac emblem. Guess where we got this from? Our people. We got so close to the prime minister that we took it right off his car while he was in it, and all of his guards were around. We took it. Now, if we can do that, imagine how much closer we can get to him." I mean, that man should be in jail. He's the security, he's the police, the head of police in Israel right now. So, I mean, I have a movie of him linked where him and his gang are coming in and he turns his back on the Palestinian street vendors and says something in Hebrew, which and then all of his goons started pulling on things and tearing up things, beating up the Palestinian owners of this clothing shop. And then he even tried to get in a little bit. His belly got in closer for a blow than his head, but he and these and this is the guy who runs security and police for and justice on the streets, and he's going around with his gangs and doing this. I mean, this is unholy. This is Israel. This is the kingdom of Judea and Israel about to go into the Babylonian captivity. This is the things that Jeremiah had to strip naked walking down Jerusalem's streets yelling, "Repent," which means remember, come together. Sin is to forget God. That's what it means, to forget the divine. Repent, come back, because you're heading, Babylonians conquered them. They burned down the first temple. I mean, this is an Israel that is seeking another end, the end of the Amalekites, but they're running right into the end of Judea and and Israel, the two kingdoms, and the captivity of the survivors. And ironically, who saved Israel in those days are the very same people, the Iranians, that they want to destroy. So this group is not only facing the utter destruction of, again, biblically, from their forgetting God and forgetting repenting and forgetting being decent people, yeah, fearing God, this arrogance, it will lead them exactly. It is heading towards exactly the same. It's not just me saying it. It is my contacts in Israel, Kabbalists and people were also saying it. And the Iranians are not going to rebuild the Jewish state like they did in the Bible back then after the Babylonians were conquered. That door is shut too. They may be, ironically, karma comes back, the hand that helped King Cyrus comes back to hit the Iranian people who are the descendants of the Persians. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, if you think biblically too unconsciously, you end up getting things from the Bible happening to you that you really weren't planning for.
Mhm.
I don't think the people of Jeremiah's time were listening because they were as arrogant as the people running Israel today, as biblically arrogant, that they wouldn't even see it coming because we're the smartest seed of Abraham on the block. We're the superior seed. It's just like the idiot of Big Brother American that they want to make fight their wars for them. Well, why not? If they can make their big dumb friend, the Americans, throw his treasure, his blood, his kids into wars against Iraq. That was one. Syria, they almost got in 2013. But Obama almost went the same route as Bush with the Syrians. And now, the big guy on the block that's not some semi-destroyed neighbor of Israel or a sheepish following weak country like Jordan, it's Iran. But I have a funny feeling that Iran already has nukes. Because isn't it funny how all this time, this very clownish stuff that Bin Laden, Netanyahu is an interesting Freudian slip. Bin Laden and Netanyahu, they have a lot in common. They're seed of Abraham. That's for one thing. But the the all the times, for all the years that this longest serving prime minister of the Jewish state has been coming every September to the United Nations with his placards and his trying to prove that Iran has the bomb. And they're just a few weeks away. How about 20 years of saying they're just a few weeks away, a few days, a few this, and then he's got those silly cartoons with the bomb and all of that. Have you noticed that over the last few years he's said nothing about it?
I
I'm
know
just
that is
having this
strange.
epiphany right now. He's not
No,
saying
it's
anything about it because they have it.
mhm.
Just saying
Yeah.
the Iranians have it.
Um,
He's gotten pretty quiet about it. Well, anytime now, anytime. He's gotten really quiet about that. He was like all the time. I'm Winston Churchill trying to awaken the world that World War III is coming, like he did for World War II. And what happened to Winston? He hasn't been doing the Winston the last few years. It's like it never happened. I'm just having this epiphany now. I didn't even think of this until this moment.
mhm.
So we'll have to see. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to let this episode 13, wrap up here.
13
But before, yeah, this is 13. Um,
is my lucky number.
so I just want to remind the audience, make sure you click the link that will take you to John's website. He does readings. He also has a periodical that you can sign up for and pay either monthly or annually. So please click
Do an
that link.
automatic. Yeah, it's an annual or monthly. That's right. Yes.
right. So, it's been informative, John, as always. And, it's unfortunate that we have to, stop now, but we'll take it up again in 2 weeks or so and, pick it up again. I'm sure that what's going to emerge out of this chaos that happened today will
Yeah.
be interesting, and who knows what happens. I don't know, but
It's like Paul, and when we do a 2 week, it's like everything has changed, and it's going to just get more like that.
well, what's interesting is that because we have these 13 shows on top of the ones that we've done before, but just these 13 shows, there's this catalog, and we're capturing these events.
Yeah, we are.
And perhaps, we can do something with these, and wrap them in a certain way
Yeah.
so people can see this whole arc that we've been cataloging.
Yeah, it's almost like a
Mm.
box set of, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think I can tell you that a lot of people are writing me about these 13 episodes. I mean, it's
Well,
a whole other level than all the stuff we did before. That was
yeah.
all trying to get all the kinks out until this whole thing started in with October 7th, I think, and then because now we're really in the nitty-gritty of the Third World War. Now I'm starting to see other people in the alternative media say the same thing, so I don't feel so alone about it. But this isn't the Cold War. This there's been two Cold Wars, and I'll finish on this. The famous Cold War that started in 48 and ended officially in 1989, even though people string it over to 1991. That's when it officially ended, according to Bush and Gorbachev, officially. And since they were the two main fighters of it, then these are afterward wars and stuff that happened after the unraveling of the Soviet Union. All that is some other chapter, not World War. So the Cold War ended, and then the American hegemonic period started. And then in 2014, over Ukraine and Nazis being led to overthrow the democratically elected Kiev government, which was respecting both Russians and Ukrainians, but now it's all Ukrainians and Russians. You either get out and we take all your industrial stuff off, or we wipe you out. And that has led to the beginning with that civil war. That was the beginning of Cold War II. But Cold War II ended in February of 2022, I believe. And it became a conventional phase, and hopefully only remains the conventional phase of the Third World War, which is a war between, it's like a world war. The West, which is losing power, is trying to keep power. And even if it has to assassinate leaders and do that, it's going to go after the BRICS. And the way you do is Taiwan is still on the dance list, the date list. I mean, China is next because these are the two powers that are together are more powerful. This is a world war setup. And just like I said last show, it's really a great thing to watch. And now that most of them are almost finished their 6-year part, the World War II week by week is if you just type that in online, you'll find them with Indy Neidell and Spartacus Olson and are doing a remarkable job of giving you a feeling each week of the war, all 300, 400 weeks of it, they do a 15-minute thing about the week with amazing graphics and all the movements. And it gives you a perspective that World War II didn't really kick into being recognized as a world war until December 7th, 1941. And it had already been raging since September 1st or 2nd, 1939. But if you watch it week by week, you'll see how it's all mapped out and how it didn't look like it looked like this.
Right.
And,
Right, exactly.
and then maybe the moment where everybody goes, shit, this is a world war is when NATO's no longer fighting proxy and the Americans are getting ready to do something about Taiwan front, the new Eastern Front. And suddenly the military catches up with the politics that was already kind of there, and then it got to shooting. I mean, but really, it was almost halfway through World War II before it really became a world war. But everybody could not deny it.
Oh, okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here. But again, the ones that are listening, please click the link. They'll take you to John's website. Please purchase his products.
Thank
So,
you, everybody.
yep, say goodbye, John, to everybody.
Goodbye, everyone. I love
And
you.
it was Mocha Mocha,
Oh
right?
no, no, that's coffee,
I was
coffee. No, in Russian,
uh,
it's because I watch Luna the Pantera. It's great therapy to listen to that big purring, and the Vikia, she's a Chekhov character doing a running babbling account in Russian that's really funny.
what was
And
it called?
anyway, so she always ends it with the bye bye in Russian, which is poka poka
Polka Polka. Right.
poka poka.
Okay. All right. So let me stop the recording here.